All right. So I just wanted to start by thanking everyone who's tuning in tonight on Facebook or on YouTube just to kind of see what's going on. I know there's a lot of anxiety in the community and um, people have really been anxiously awaiting to hear kind of some of the school board's plans. And so tonight is a presentation of where we're at right now and what we're looking at for the fall. And so as always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And my number is listed on the district's website, and I'm happy to talk to anyone who feels like they have some concerns. All right. Superintendent McDowell.
Are you ready?
Where do you want to start?
All right. Yep. I'm going to just set up and share my screen here, and then we'll get going. There. Everybody can see that? We're good? All right. Well, thank you. And tonight, as pointed out by Chair Waits, we are going to share what we're calling our Bridge to Learning 2020 plan. And you can see the nifty graphic we have there that also includes a circle around it with 3 arrows, which really gets at the idea that this is a fluid plan. It's going to change. We are going to be basing decisions over the next 9 months off of the best information we have over periods of time, as well as taking into account, as you'll find out a little bit later on, all of the different components that go into even making the most minute change and the impacts that can have on our entire system as we move through our planning for the fall. Our intent tonight, or my intent, is to work through this slide deck with the board, be able to take some questions from the board, and then hopefully outline what our next steps are, because at this point, the plan that I'm presenting tonight has been the work of our teachers, administrators for the last 2 weeks, and it is our best guess of where we believe we should be going as we enter the first day of school. So that, computer's not, there we go. So here's what we know. We know that last spring was a temporary shift of instruction, right? It was a temporary fix, but it did provide insight into what worked well, what didn't work well, and we were able to kind of glean what could we improve upon, no different than any other district. That's a little bit different than where we are right now, which is 2020, 2021 school planning, where we're basing decisions off of guidance and recommendations, not only from the governor, but also layering on the Minnesota Department of Health information and the Minnesota Department of Education information. Over the course of the summer, we've been expected to come up with plans around 3 different scenarios: the in-person scenario, the hybrid scenario, and the distance learning scenario. What changed last week was this articulation by level, which means what will you do when you have one level, elementary, that could potentially be in a situation to be in person, and secondary be hybrid or distance learning. That was not something that we were expected to come up with as we worked through the summer. So that was an entirely different shift on what the original plans were. The plans this year also require that we follow the guidelines set out by the CDC, the Minnesota Department of Health, MDE, IDEA, which is our special education laws, as well as our national school lunch requirements, which follow at this point in time, restaurant requirements, which adds a whole different layer into how we plan. We also must allow for our families to choose distance learning regardless of what scenario we're in. And so we needed to come up with a way to offer true full-time online learning for students and families that want that as well. What we need to understand is that right now, it couldn't be more true that change is going to be our constant. Right now, our base decision-making is based on the county level of COVID cases over a 14-day period per 10,000 people. And that's the base direction. And it really gets at this idea that we're going to be changing. But what we need to understand is that at a more local level, symptoms in a classroom could impact a classroom, they could impact transportation, they could impact our whole system as a whole, even if those 14-day scenarios are different, because the local situation can change. The last thing that I'll point out is we need to know and understand that regardless of where we start the year, some people are going to like our decision and some people aren't. There are many different viewpoints on this whole situation, and every viewpoint is valid, but we've got to make the best decisions that we can at the time. So we went into the summer planning for one spot on this continuum, one spot on this dial. That's what we were looking at, either between distance learning, hybrid, or traditional face-to-face schooling. And that's what we came up with some plans around. Fortunately, we focused most of our time on hybrid modeling because that requires you to plan for distance learning and in-person learning at the same time, as well as taking into account a mixture of that. So the baseline decision making for folks watching this and maybe haven't seen it, and how we determine what the recommended model means, is that if we have 0 to 9 cases out of 10,000, that means that the baseline recommendation was we would be back in school as we would have experienced before March of last year. It means there's no restrictions on how we do things, full transportation, everything looks normal. If we get to 10 to 19 cases over a 14-day period, what this means is we would have in Hastings, our K4 students would be in person, having no restrictions, but our secondary students would be in a hybrid model, having restrictions. And then as you progress through it, you can see that the next phase means that all students, K12, are in hybrid. And then when we hit 30 students, it's hybrid for elementary, but secondary shifts to distance learning. And then once we hit 50 or more, then our baseline is distance learning for all. Important things to note here is these are baseline recommendations. They're not requirements. And what we can do as a district is decide to go more restrictive when we want, but we can't go less restrictive than the model would dictate without consulting local health officials. So we can always go more restrictive. So you've seen Minneapolis, you've seen St. Paul, other districts have already announced they're going distance learning. They can do that. They just have to let MDE know that that's what they're doing. They can't move below their county recommendation, however, without. So right now, our model would put us at hybrid for secondary and traditional in-school for elementary as a baseline. And as you can tell, this is a little bit different. And what I was talking about, not what we planned for originally. This creates some issues for us in transportation, for families, the whole 9 yards. And what I want to share with you next is our current data. So across the top, you can see that we, at last count, when MDE came out, we were at that red circle of 16.79 cases per 10,000 in Dakota County. What I want to draw your attention to is below that is from our Dakota County website. As of today, we have 63 cases that are being calculated. That's up from, I believe, 58 yesterday, and that blue line shows you our trajectory. So we are able to right now, we have a system going where we're monitoring on a daily basis the numbers and have figured out the calculation so that we can every day shift 14, 14, 14. And right now we are at 21.38 on a 14-day calculation, trending upward. So that's important for us to know because that's a factor of making decisions. So what all besides that data are we using to make decisions? Really is some important information. Over the last month, we've engaged in parent surveys, staff surveys. We've had focus groups with parent groups. We've had a focus group with student groups. We've had different staff, licensed and unlicensed staff in focus groups. We have spent countless hours with staff and building administrators, including a 2-day retreat where we brought teachers and administrators together. And then our district administrators have spent the last 2 weeks really digging into all of the information and trying to come up with a plan that makes the most sense. And as I pointed out before, on the right-hand side, you'll see all the organizations that we're working with and almost in a daily contact with, to include our Metro superintendents and our Metro job alike group. So our direct, Jen Reichel is meeting with curriculum folks. Dave Haveman is meeting with special ed folks. Jen Subert is meeting with finance folks so that we understand where everyone is and how they're going about making decisions as well. From all of the information we gathered, we really came up with some values and a guiding change document. And what you see here on this slide is really a compilation of both. What we learned was that the things that are important as we're planning for 2021, safety for both our students and our staff, right? That's an important thing. But families and staff really wanted this year to have consistency and predictability in it. They really wanted to make sure we could figure out how to communicate even better than what happened last year. We need to include mental health support, regardless of whether we're in person or we're not in person. We need to maintain rigor for our kids. We heard that at every level, back to the consistency and predictability, that families really want a consistent, rigorous curriculum, not meaning that we're making it overly difficult, but that it was similar from student to student, and we didn't have discrepancies between levels or the amount of work or the rigor of work. We also know that we need to be nimble and flexible in this. We need to design a system that we can turn on a dime. You know, we can plan to be in hybrid and go to distance learning and tell everybody, you know, in a week we're going to go to distance learning. We can plan and we can move to in-person. But what might happen is being in person, we might have a breakout and we might have to go straight to distance learning in the course of 24 hours. And so we need to be nimble in our planning and flexible in that because not everybody might be moving at the same time. To that end, we've used distance learning as our base. Everybody's got to be able to do distance learning well. And we need to be not just the instruction and the content, but also maintaining the connections between our kids and our teachers and between our students and our students throughout the course of this, which lays right into ensuring access, the connections to relationships, and then balancing technology with the manipulatives. And what that is referring to is we heard from our families that yes, we want to be able to access things online, but we still want our kids to have the paper and pencil, for lack of a better term, things at home to do so that they're not just doing things on the screen. And so with that, we're viewing ultimately everything from an equity lens. How do we get what we need kids to have regardless of who the kid is in our system? They all need to be able to have what they need to do what we need to have them do. A bigger list, and I know I'm throwing tons of lists at you, but I think what it's showing is the amount of complexity going into this. Everything on this page has some level of implication based on any given decision we make. Athletics and activities, as we've learned in the last couple of days, and I'll get to that in a bit, is greatly impacted. What we do in the course of a day impacts athletics and activities. We need to make sure that no matter what model we're in, we can adequately staff not only that model, but our distance learning model at the same time. We have to provide synchronous and asynchronous instruction at the same time now, different than in the spring, but at the same time. We have childcare. We've talked at facilities about our cleaning routines, our air filtration, how we're going to communicate, how do we notify, food, both during school, out of school. What does our community need? What are the distance learning options? We need to make sure that we have health management procedures for both students and staff. We have risk mitigation that we got to take care of, and that is from bus to bus, from building to building, from classroom to classroom. We still need to take care of our special populations. We have to ensure that whatever we come up with has capacity across the system. Can our teachers be tooled up to do what we need them to do in the time that we need them to do that? Do we have the support at the district level to offer the level of PD that we need to offer? Can we manage everything that we're putting in place from a technology standpoint at the same time? And all the what ifs that go into that. And then again, we're looking specifically at student and staff safety, access to devices, the training and professional development, and lastly, and hugely, transportation. So all that in mind, what I'm presenting tonight, and what I would say is my recommendation, is that we look at going to a K12 hybrid model at this point in time. And the reasons that we'll get into more specifically as we move through, but right now you can see in the hybrid model, we have to do the things on this page. We've got to limit building occupancy to 50% with sufficient room for the 6-foot social distancing. We're going to have signage. We've got to pay attention to our traffic flow. We're going to have to limit, if not exclude, quite a bit of visitors and parents during the day unless there's appointments. We have to work on room occupancy at 50% social distancing. That means we're into this risk mitigation system, which is how do we sanitize the things that we need to sanitize throughout the day? How do we sanitize stuff at night? And how do we continue to keep our spaces organized for that social distancing? And then with the hybrid model, transportation is also limited to 50%, which means our buses can only run with 36 students maximum on them. We have to clean those buses during the routes or after the routes, and then again at night. And then we need to figure out how do we keep families together as we move through this process from a transportation. And so the reason that I started off this slide by saying my recommendation is we do K12, you'll remember back to the slides that really our numbers at the point right now would say K4 could be in person, 512 could be hybrid. Well, once we go hybrid 512, we aren't able to provide transportation with a bus that has 50% of its kids that can sit 3 kids to a seat, 50% of its kids that can sit 50% on the bus. That doesn't jive real well. We've got systems operating with 2 different sets of requirements. The other thing that takes place is we will have families that are operating under 2 systems. So if we have a family that has students at the elementary level and the secondary level, the elementary kids would be going to school differently than our secondary kids. And now we've got 2 different types of schedules to keep track of. Additionally, what you'll be seeing across districts now that are actually putting their systems out there, most districts are going to 1 system at a time, which means they're moving their elementary kids to the hybrid model along with their secondary kids. And I believe the reason is the same thought that I would have as I showed in the one slide, our trajectory is moving up. If we play this thing out, we most likely would be around 25 kids and then or 25 cases per 10,000 in the next week or so, which means we're going to be in hybrid anyway. So we're trying to minimize the amount of confusion with parents as well. So that's what the rest of the presentation tonight is really going to be explaining the details of our hybrid model. So the Hastings hybrid model looks like this. If a week has 5 days in it, we would be on what's called an AA Flex BB schedule, where the A group, so students for the most part would be divided by alphabet in half. So imagine A through L are the AA kids and M through Z are the BB kids. So the A kids would attend school every week on Mondays and Tuesdays. Meets the consistency piece that parents wanted. B students would meet on Thursdays and Fridays. Again, the consistency. A is cohort 1 from a scheduling standpoint, and B is cohort 2. And so a cohort of students, again, travels 2 days in a row back to back, and then has distance learning for the rest of the 3 days. And then we get to the next week and they do the same thing. In less than a 5-day week, there's no flex day. So for example, in a 2-day week, A would go on Monday and B would go on Tuesday, because now we're able to balance the quarters and the semester for students who have in-person contact. So we go a little bit deeper into this. Here's what elementary school would end up playing out like. Elementary would run from 9:40 to 3:25. And for those of you who've been around for a while, you'll notice that times are adjusted a little bit with this. All 3 elementary schools will run at the same time each day. Again, you're going to notice a change with this. The reason is we got to keep our elementary schools operating in this model where we have to shift the nimble and flexible. If we're shifting from an in-person to a hybrid, and elementary is going to be at a different spot than secondary, we can't have kids on a K12 bus anymore. We need to have kids sectioned off as elementary kids and as secondary students. Otherwise, we can't operate in two tiers at the same time. It's the exact issue that many of our neighboring districts are having and have had to make similar changes. So each cohort at the elementary, when they get to a building, will be divided into 3 groups by grade. And then at a 3-week interval, a student will have an in-person experience with their assigned teachers and then a specialist. And the specialist will rotate in and out of those every 3 weeks. So if I go back to the AA schedule, if I'm an A student, I go to elementary school on Monday and Tuesday, and I have 3 teachers that I experience in that 3-week period of time, every Monday and Tuesday in person, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, not in person. One of those will be the specialist. So for the first 3 weeks, I may have art. Then the next 3 weeks, I may have music. And that's what the elementary rotation will look like. But I'll always have, for lack of a better term, a home-based teacher that's my connection point. That's my 3rd grade person that I'm with throughout the course of the year. At the middle school, again, you'll notice the time looks a little bit different because in order to have buses operate at half capacity, we have to run more buses and we have to spread this thing out more than what we had to before. But at the middle school, our students are divided in what we're calling learning groups. And each learning group that's broken up will experience 3 100-minute classes each day. So for the first 10 days of the school year, I'm going to attend periods 1, periods 3, and periods 5 of my schedule. And then for the second 10 days, I'm going to attend periods 2, periods 4, and period 6. And the middle school will be on that rotation for that. And then the high school. The high school will run from 7:50 to 1:50. And a student, much like middle school, will experience 3 periods in a day, but it'll be 85-minute periods. And they will rotate a little bit different in that as a high school student, I will be in my 1st hour, 3rd hour, and 7th hour for 4.5 weeks. So at the high school, what we're trying to do is, because those classes have a little bit more content to get through, we're going to run those as midterm classes. So for 4.5 weeks, I'm experiencing my classes 1, 3, and 7, digging in deeply for 4.5 weeks. But what we heard from families is that 7 classes in a day, distance learning, is way too much. And so this allows us to break it up and do it in half quarter chunks. So then the next 4.5 weeks of the quarter is 2, 4, and 6. Then what you'll see is that we're going to run what's called a skinny every day because we have the 7-period day. So period 5 is going to run every day all year long, but for 45 minutes. In addition to that, when students, because the day has to be chunked out equally, the other half of that 90-minute block, you can see in the last bullet there, we're going to have our high school students have an advisory. Again, back to the social, emotional, and mental health piece of this, an opportunity for our high school kids to stay connected in something more than just academics with the adults in our buildings. So a little bit more about flex days. On a flex day, so in our case, this is Wednesdays, students will not be in buildings. Transportation doesn't run. And the reason for this is the safety and risk mitigation piece, as well as kind of an ability to regroup. So it creates a window of separation between those 2 cohort groups. So you have the same group of kids coming in on Monday and Tuesday. They then go. We clean on Wednesday, a deep cleaning, and then a different set of kids comes in on Thursday and Friday. This mitigates one more opportunity for kind of a cross-pollination of germs and viruses to happen. Again, it allows us to deep clean the buildings midweek, and it's intended to be an asynchronous, flexible learning in addition to that need of professional development and training and connection with students. So on a Wednesday, students might be learning, teachers might be checking in with them to make sure things are going okay, and it provides us an opportunity to say, hey, staff, we need to train you up on this new thing inside of Infinite Campus, or we need to make sure everybody knows how to do this new thing in Zoom as we move along throughout the year. An added component is what we're referring to as Hastings Online Academy. So this is distance learning for students and families that want full-time online learning. This is different than when a building shifts into distance learning because of a COVID-related thing. That's going to still function. These are entirely different classes. These happen on a different frame than what's happening with everyone else. So we are going to ask families to opt in for at least a semester at a time so we can plan, because we're rescheduling staff schedules at the high school, at the middle school, and at the elementary school level to accommodate students. We already have about 150 families that have signed up, and we anticipate after tonight we probably are going to get some more families sign up for this. Elementary right now is planning to run with its own curriculum and teachers, but at the secondary, we are going to utilize a accredited online program called Edgenuity, which allows us to use their software and their curriculum and content, but use our teachers. Because another thing that we heard loud and clear with online is our families and students still want to have connection with our teachers, our Hastings staff, even when we're online. And so this allows us to offer a robust curriculum that we know is aligned with Minnesota standards and have our teachers be a part of the delivery of that. Moving into preschool, just some frame of reference, we have 180 total preschool slots. Right now, we have 58 people that are confirmed for general education in preschool and 48 confirmed for our early childhood special education program. What we heard from parents on the right there is nobody really had an interest in doing distance learning. They wanted in person. So we've decided if we need to collapse sections to get kids into neater cohorts, we're going to do that. And we're going to deliver preschool all in person. We're going to deliver the same programming, and we're going to continue to use our co-teaching model between general education and special education so that those families get an experience for their students that they truly want to have and would be paying for. Moving on to transportation. Whoops. So at this point in time, we do need to accommodate the 50% capacity. And to that end, like I explained before, we have to shift to a two-tier system. That means we're going to have an elementary tier and we're going to have a secondary tier for transportation. It also means that Pinecrest, again, as I shared before, moves to the same schedule as the other two buildings. This is a difficult one, we understand, and a change for some families. But again, when we look at things as a system and being able to move back and forth, we have to have our elementaries on the same schedule in order to do that, because we could be in a spot where elementary is not running the same instructional schedule that the secondary is. They might be in person full-time and our secondary might not be, and those have two different requirements. To this end, and to help us alleviate space issues as much as we can, we are going to ask families to opt out. This is a very common thing happening right now. It doesn't mean we won't provide transportation. We will obviously provide transportation to our families that need it, as we have in the past. But for families, and in our survey, what we learned is we had quite a few families that would be willing to drive their students to and from school and are able to do that. And we're going to ask them simply to opt out. Doesn't mean they can't opt back in if things would change, but that will be a way for us to mitigate some things as we move through this. To help at the high school, we're hoping that by not charging this year for high school permits, we will get more students driving rather than riding the bus to school. And that again will help free up space on our school buses. So then with regard to the calendar, this has been something, if you remember, maybe 3 weeks ago as a board, I brought up the idea of maybe we should look at changing a calendar. We really have landed, I think like other districts did, on the idea that we don't want to change the calendar at this point because we don't know what the whole year is going to look like. We don't have that information. And so how can we layer on top of our already scheduled calendar with the least amount of changes, this AABB flex rotation? So here's what it looks like. We think we should schedule our calendar out through Thanksgiving break. And as we approach Thanksgiving break, we look and see what do we do for the next set, probably through winter break. What should we do? Or spring break or something like that. Our workshop week would stay as it's written, where it would be the week of the 24th of August. And then what we would change is we would change what the first week of school looks like. If you remember, in a normal year where we're in person, we have time set aside for groups of kids to come into the buildings while other students aren't there. Well, we obviously need to figure out how do we do that and everything else. So what we are planning to do is the week of August 31st, which in our calendar would be the first week of instruction, are still going to be considered school days, but those are going to be days where we're going to schedule our kindergarten, our fifth grade, and our ninth graders to be able to come into buildings at a much more socially distanced way, in a more distanced way, and help those students figure out the buildings. Because in a hybrid model, those kids are still going to need to be in the building. And so they're going to need to be acclimated to that. They're going to need help getting set up with technology, understanding how the system's going to work, understanding how do I get food, all that kind of stuff that goes into it, along with some community building. And so we're going to take that first week or that last week of August to be time to do that, as well as for teachers who don't have a kindergarten, fifth grade, or ninth grade, to start reaching out to students and doing their Zoom calls, doing their check-in calls, meeting online, setting up things, making sure kids know how to do things, because that was another thing that we heard from parents loud and clear is we really need to utilize the technology in a way that creates more of a relationship than just my students seeing the teacher on instructional time. Our classes, so actual classes, would then start on September 8th. So the AA Flex BB schedule would start on September 8th. So here's what it would look like. So I'll explain it again. This is just more of a visual of what I just talked about. So we would be looking at, on August, those two dark blue ones, that's when our new teachers come back and do their training. August 24th is workshop week. And then we don't have school on the 28th or the 30th. And then the 31st is when we would start our connection days. So the 31st through the 3rd would be connection days, K12, actually pre-K12. We don't have school on the 4th. We didn't change that. And we don't have school, obviously, on the 7th. Then you'll see that the days start to rotate between dark blue, gold, and green. So the 8th and 9th would be AA. The 10th and 11th, remember that's a 4-day week, so no flex day. 10th and 11th would be BB. And then you can see as we progress through September, 2 blue days, a flex day, 2 gold days. And then it works its way all the way through October. And you'll see that again, when we hit the week of MEA, because it's a 2-day week, we have 1 blue day and 1 gold day. And then that gets us all the way through Thanksgiving break. My anticipation would be that as we move through October, we would be having a similar conversation like we are tonight, saying, here's what we think this is going to look like for the next set of whether it's 4 months or 3 months or things like that. So now into some of the more specific things that are happening and making people aware. So with regard to food service, we have a plan for all 3 levels in addition to when we are off day schedule, which means like a flex day or things like that. So all kids will have a grab and go breakfast. And that option will still stay there. Really what happens for lunch is we have to pare down what we can offer for lunch. We have to meet certain guidelines and criteria, not only for social distancing, but for what we can offer and how we can offer it. Right now, we have to follow the same guidelines that restaurants would follow in terms of keeping social distancing and things like that. What you'll see at all 3 levels is really students are going to order their meal in the morning, and then depending upon level, they may be dining in their classroom or in the cafeteria or a combination of both. There's a limited menu and we're not going to be accepting cash. We've worked out a system where we're going to have scanners and we're going to utilize barcodes on student IDs so that we can mitigate the amount of touch points that kids would have at lunch. And our food service group and our principals are figuring out the details of how that works. You'll see in the top right corner, something that we want to make sure parents are aware of is that the national school lunch regulations come back into play as we get into the school year again, which means that student accounts start getting charged for meals based on what category they're in. So this is another reminder that if anyone thinks that they may qualify for free and reduced lunch, we really need those applications to be filled out. It's a reminder that free and reduced lunch is a very is a system where it's a very private system, and people don't know unless they absolutely have to know for purposes of getting things organized that anyone is on free and reduced lunch. So we really need to make sure that we push families or we push getting families to know that they really need to fill out free and reduced if they think they might qualify for that, so that we can get them the food that they need. Special populations. We have to be considering not only special ed, but kids on 504, our English learners, our homeless students, and we have students that we serve who are our non-public students. And so special education has really been working on how do they do this and meet the needs and the minutes and the services of all their kids. So our case managers are going to be meeting with all of our families. And while we're going to create a model that's designed to limit movement and mixing of groups, we are going to be focused on how do our plans meet the goals and the requirements based on evaluations so that students are getting the support and assistance they need and deserve as a special education student. The same thing with 504 plan in terms of students on 504s will have their accommodations reviewed so that based on the delivery model we are in, the accommodations are appropriate for every of those, each one of those models. English learning program is going to continue and support will continue. Our English learners will continue to be aligned in their learning to the grade level curriculum. And we're working really closely with our EL teachers to make sure that we're providing the support needed for all those students. We are going to be prioritizing our students in transition or our homeless students to make sure that they have their in-person instruction when they need it and that they're getting transportation to our schools when they need it. And then we're going to continue our services and use distance learning for our non-public schools, just like we would regularly. Mental health and our social emotional will continue. And so we've set this slide up kind of like a RTI model, response to intervention. We know that all students, we need to plan for teachers and curriculum for all students to receive baseline mental health services with our school counselors, our school psychologists, and all the things that go on in advisory and things like that. Some of our students are still going to need more time with social workers, psychologists, our equity coordinator, communities in schools, AmeriCorps, and our behavior specialists. And then we're still connected for some of our students or a few of our students with Canvas Health, Chemical Health, and Sterno and Associates. And so those will still be in play. And then childcare. We're still going to be offering childcare, and childcare will take the place before school, after school, midday, on flex days, and on non-school days. And what this slide is just intended to show is that we're going to have before school care and after school care at each of our elementary schools and at a midday site that looks like it's probably going to be the middle school at this point. We're going to be offering before school care and after school care at the times listed there. And then we are also going to be offering midday care. So that's the care that runs from roughly 9:20 in the morning to 3:25. And that will be free for tier 1 workers, but it will be a fee pay for anyone else at this point. Flex days, remember we don't have school in session. We're going to be offering daycare for the entire day. And then our regular time, so not before and not after, so a 9:20 to 3:20, that'll be free for tier 1, but before care and after care becomes fee-based for everybody at that point in time. And then non-school days would be the same thing. So daycare will run from 6:30 to 6, and it's a fee-based program for all. With regard to technology, not a lot of new news here. It's just more access, which is a good thing because we really want technology to become invisible in all this. But we do have on order iPads, so we can have an iPad for all of our K4 students. We have Chromebooks on order, so we can have a Chromebook for each one of our 512 students. We have updated hotspots, some already here and some on order. And then we're working on figuring out during that connections week and throughout the year, how do we really train our students to be proficient at the devices? That's one thing we also heard from our families was, don't just put a device in my students' hands. Take the time to help them understand how to use it and how to use it effectively. And so we know that we need to do that. And then hot off the presses is our athletics. For those that have been paying attention, no news on necessarily baseball yet, Lisa, but all right. But we do know for sure that we're going to have a modified season for tennis, cross country, and soccer for the fall. And we do know that football and volleyball will be moved to spring. And so if you haven't seen the details, right now it looks like we're essentially going to have two shortened spring seasons. One that's got typical spring sports, and then the other one will have football and volleyball. More to come on all of that. It looks like fall athletics is going to plan to start up somewhere around August 17th, is what the Minnesota High School League had said. But we'll wait for more guidance on what they allow us to do there.
Hey, Bob, what about girls swimming?
I
think that was on the approved list, subject to USA Swimming.
That could have been. These were the ones that were fully approved as of yesterday. So swimming might yet to be come out. I think that's going to be a daily base, one of those things. So that could very well. It could even be approved since I put this together. I want to make sure that I covered risk mitigation and safety, because that's a big thing on a lot of families' minds, is how are we going to do this? And we talked about the difference between safety and risk mitigation at a couple of our board meetings. And I think it's really important that we focus on risk mitigation in order to keep people safe. That's really what we're doing, as safe as possible. And so we will be running our buildings at 50% occupancy. We're keeping our kids on a 2-day cycle. We're minimizing that movement throughout the day. We've got a controlled lunch delivery. We're cleaning throughout the day. We're deep cleaning on Wednesdays and then Fridays and Saturdays. And as you'll see in a moment, we've got flowcharts and quarantine rooms for all of our buildings. And we're making filtration adjustments to all of our HVAC systems in our buildings that we can. So one of the questions that comes up, and these are just two examples, one on the left is an employee and one is a student, but it expresses the level of detail that we've been working on. And I have to give kudos to Dave Haveman and Deanna Werner and Cam Peterson and Carrie Gore, and the work that they've done to try and figure out what makes sense. And we've been fortunate that we were able to utilize some of these practices with our summer programming and when things happen. But essentially we have 4 spreadsheets that look like this, or 4 flowcharts rather, that look like this. One, if an employee becomes ill at work, and one if an employee would become ill prior to coming work. And then the same thing for a student. A student becomes ill while at school, or a student has symptoms and they're not at school. And as you can see, these flowcharts give us and our staff the direction of really a bunch of if-then statements. You know, if I'm at home and I'm a student, my parent and guardian needs to let the school know. And then we go through a whole sequence of events, getting us all the way through the end of this flowchart, so that we can make sure that we're making the appropriate moves depending upon who has a symptom, who gets sick at school, what is the contact tracing we can do, when do we need to contact MDH, how do we notify families, when do we need to potentially shut down a classroom, a series of classrooms, a building, a transportation route. So this I wanted to share is not only for the board, but for folks at home, is this is the level of detail we're operating on right now to help keep all of our kids and staff safe throughout the day, should we need to utilize it. So that is 47 minutes of a lot of information. But that's our plan. And again, that's the plan I would be recommending that we move on. I realize that we want to take some feedback and questions from the board. I realize that inside of that plan, we may have some families that have questions and are wondering about stuff. But I also know in watching other districts, we would be in good shape to suggest and make a decision about a plan moving forward sooner than later, and then adapt off of that plan. Because we have families that are trying to make decisions about not only do I want to send my kid to school, but do I need daycare? When do I need daycare? How do I set this up? What am I going to do with my kids? So I don't think we should wait much longer. And quite frankly, this is my best recommendation of where I believe we should be going right now, based on the trend data and all the information we have. So I'll turn it over to you, Kelsey, and the board and questions. And we do have other folks on here that can answer some detailed questions. And I can stop sharing my screen unless you think it would be helpful to keep it up to flow back and forth between slides. Maybe that would be easier.
Well, let's try leaving them up. The only difficulty is I can't see if people are raising their hands when the screen is shared. And so please, you can send it in a chat or speak up. There are a lot of people watching from home as well, almost 500 right now. And so
Wow.
this is a lot of people have a lot of concerns. And so please ask any and all questions you have.
Board members check their mute buttons, they'll know if someone's getting ready to speak or not.
You're really, Brian, it's really hard to hear you. You may have to move your mic a little closer.
Okay, I might switch over to another speaker. Can you hear me better now?
A little bit, still pretty light.
Huh, weird. Okay, I might switch to another device, but I'm just saying that you can watch the mute buttons to determine if someone is going to speak or not. Board members can.
Okay, I will look at that then. So I see Lisa is unmuted. So do you have a question, Lisa?
Yes, and I would hope maybe somebody from the administrative team could expand on what would a non-instructional day look like for a student at home? Would we anticipate, and maybe at the high school, middle school, and elementary level? I feel like we made a good presentation on the instructional day. So would you expect an asynchronous learning component? Would they be in contact with the same teachers? Just in general, what would each of those levels look like? Not on the flex day, but on their distance learning day. Thank you.
Sure, I'd open up to any principal.
Okay, so yeah, Mike is raising his hand here.
It's a great question. We want there to be increased expectations over last spring, both for rigor as well as student contact. So if a student is on a B day and they typically are in school on A, they still would be expected to be during that class time connecting with their class and their teacher for what the teacher has put forth. So if I'm teaching physics, it may be that I'm doing a demonstration or a lecture, and I want the students to view part of my demonstration and then be part of a discussion or lab group. It also may be in my physics class that I may have asynchronous work for them to do, more project-based. I think teachers are trying to get away from the thought of it being homework, but learning that they can do on their own, and then try to find a way to interact with the teacher or the class. So we know that there's a range that it might be when I say synchronous to people out there, that it might be that I'm on Zoom while I'm also teaching the class in person, and my entire group of 30 is logged in, listening or viewing. But it also may be that I'm working closely with the 50 that are in class, and the others who are at home during that time are doing something that they can work on either in small groups with people who are not in class, or it's individual work time. Then what we do want to have happen is later in that day or on some of these flex days is when teachers are not in class themselves teaching in person, that they are responding to student questions and they are given the professional time to connect with our students. So the student connection piece and communication is very, very important to build into both our day and our expectation.
Okay. So are there any other principals that would like to speak?
I see Paul Baker.
Okay.
Sure. At the elementary level, we're planning on using Zoom with small groups of students and the one classroom teacher that wouldn't be with, or two classroom teachers that wouldn't be with students on site, where we'd have a scheduled time in the morning and a scheduled time in the afternoon, where we'd be continuing the learning from the 2 days that were on site. The learning then would also connect from that morning Zoom session to the afternoon Zoom session. So that could look like a small group instruction time, then with some work for the students to do. And we could envision it in a way that the teacher would say, all right, when I see you in 2 hours, have these couple of things done. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about those things. You're going to share what you did. And so that's also then shifting that onto us as the teachers and not onto the parents. And so we really are thinking of that learning continuing through a week when they're the 2 days on site, and then also then connecting with it when they're off site over Zoom.
And then I saw Steve was on here. Do you have anything to add about the middle school?
Sorry, it took me a little bit to get on there. I think we do have a lot of work to do for teachers to be thinking about how to balance that synchronous and asynchronous. I worry about a little bit about the students that may not be able to tune in on those days because they have siblings at home, or but one of the things that we are really focusing on is to not make it those 2 days when the kids are not with the class, that they are just working on assignments. And I think that's what Mike had already mentioned. That one idea that I had, or that we were talking about as an admin team, just even if the synchronous doesn't work for them to be able to tune in and see the class happening, that they can participate, whether they have a learning partner. If they're a B student, they have a learning partner on the other half of the class where they can connect and do some discussion pieces through Schoology. So I think there's a lot of things in Schoology that we can leverage and use, and to make sure that those students are connected and continuing the learning. So it's not just we're doing a lesson on Monday and Tuesday, and then we do the same lesson for the B group on Thursday or Friday, because we're not going to be able to reach that higher rigor and that higher content that we need to be getting to. So I don't know if that adds anything. I think Mike and Paul hit a lot of those things, but it's going to be a lot of learning and a lot of adjusting. But I know our teachers will be up for it.
Okay, so I guess I do have a question jumping off of that. How are teachers feeling with the hybrid plan? Because I know I've heard from a number of teachers who have had concerns, and I know we've been in talks with the union and kept them up to date with kind of the planning and incorporated their feedback. And so where are they feeling right now?
And I'll just go first, and I, the group of teachers that I met with a couple of weeks ago, and then have been kind of in email contact with, tried to pick kind of a representative group of different content areas. I think when we presented the idea, it's a lot of, we've spent a lot of time developing this. So for them to hear it, it's kind of like you hearing it the first time. Also, you just can't swallow it all at one time, but they heard it. They had a lot, they brought up questions, and I think it goes direct. I have a wife who's a teacher, so I told Bob, I said, we're doing all these plans, and I run an idea by my wife, and she'll ask me 3 questions, and I'll say, dang it, I didn't think of those things, so I think they're gonna bring up a lot of things, but really what they bring up right away is, how am I going to do this in my classroom? Which is obviously, that's their world, that's where they live. You're going to have these kids at a distance. They're going to have kids in their classroom. So I think when the hesitations or the worries that they have are like, how am I going to do this and do it really well? And I think once we start planning and getting at it, I think they're gonna do awesome. And so I think, well, I'm blabbing on, but I think they see the possibilities in it for sure.
We have Lori.
Nice. Yeah, Lori's on.
Jesse is too.
And I see she's unmuted.
Yeah,
So
Jesse is too. So thank you for the chance to respond and provide some feedback. As representing all teachers, I know that, of course, we have a lot of concerns. I will say, being a middle school teacher, I've been very involved with Steve and with our admin team, and they've been upending the world and reinventing the wheel and have done a great job. I'm very confident that they are very conscientious in making things work. Jessie can speak a little more because she lives the middle school model, or I'm sorry, high school. I still have to feel a little bit out for elementary and how the details will fall out there. But I think comfort-wise, we are more comfortable going with the hybrid model right now, and the details and how we're going to make everything work. We certainly are willing to work with everyone to make that happen. And I don't know if Jessie wants to add any more into that.
Well, I'll echo the collaboration between administration and teachers and district office and everything is just, again, makes me proud to be a member of Hastings Schools. And I think we've gone through, I don't know how many times, Mike, okay, well, this is what we're talking about now. And then just the feedback from everybody and coming to what looks like for today, the plan. And the can-do attitude of my colleagues is refreshing, and we'll do it. We'll make it through. The biggest concern, going back to your question, is teachers are worried about safety, and I think that priority in these schedules is evident. So I think all of your brains for that. But we really want to make sure students are safe, employees and faculty are safe, and that we have what we need and the training to keep us all safe.
great, thank you. All right. So do we have other questions from board members? Brian?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. I'm interested in knowing, where does this leave things like ALC and the STARS program?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had some discussions about that. Mike, I wonder if you want to kind of add something, and then did I see Dave? Oh, Dave Heyman's on too, so they can talk to specifics about that.
Yeah, with ALC, we have a special group of students and families that are looking for an alternate, and we're trying to find ways to stay even more connected with our students and our families who attend the Area Learning Center. We do have some students who will start at our ALC, and then when they become a junior and senior, they're blended. So they will be transported to the high school in the afternoon for their elective classes, or vice versa. They'll start at the high school and then go to the ALC. So we are thinking about risk mitigation with our students there. We like the fact that we use blocks, because the ALC has already been using block learning, and how they can utilize that in a different way. They're also experienced with online learning and independent study. So in some ways, the ALC is ahead of us, but we've thrown out a lot of options, but in the end, it's the ALC is a place for our students that have chosen to be their place in their home. And we want to make sure that that continues. I mean, we've talked about, is there a possibility of having more presence at the high school? We also balance that with our students are saying that they need a place, that they need their own at our ALC. We have a little bit different structure there. We have smaller classes, so our room capacity is a bit smaller. However, we might take advantage of extending time a little bit differently there if there are some students that can attend a little bit later in the day. We do have some flexibility within that program, which that program really is built upon. But certainly solid foundation of academics, and then trying to partner with us. And we'll have to figure out the transportation. That seems to be a hiccup of getting students from ALC to the high school or vice versa. We'll figure that out.
Brian, thanks for the question about the STARS program. We have a relatively small group this fall, so we will have 7 kids starting in the STARS program this fall, and we've been relocated back to the high school from the Ramsey Street location, so all of them will be under one roof. With 7 kids and 3 staff members, we shouldn't have any trouble with social distancing there. Where we're going to run into some problems possibly is because the STARS program is a community-based program. So our main classroom space is in the community at work sites, and since some of that is up in the air, we're going to have to take some of that as it comes. I can imagine some community partners will maybe elect to partner with us differently. Some might not want to partner with us at all right now, and so we're going to have to just kind of see how we're going to do that. Part of the STARS program too is classroom based, and so we do teach the students in the classroom how to apply those skills in the community or job setting. So that will continue, but I'm not sure yet how our community partnerships are going to be affected until we get some of the staff back and we start reaching out to those partners to figure out what comes next.
So do you folks anticipate, for example, the STARS kids being able to be in every day, or the LC kids being in every day, or will they be in and out as well? Because I've gotten feedback that's really important for them, because to Mike's point, it's a home for them. And I'm wondering if because it's a smaller cohort, if there's a way to keep them together.
So I'll answer for STARS. STARS is a center-based program, meaning that most, if not all, of the students in STARS are considered in a special ed pull-out program for between 60 and 100% of their day. So their minutes and their IEPs currently state that they need to receive this kind of service at that rate in order to make progress on their goals in their IEP. So for students that are receiving that level of service district-wide, and that would be in our STARS and our LEAP programs and maybe our Bridge programs as well, we, just like the other districts around us, are planning on having those students attending all 4 of the days, not in a flip-flopped hybrid schedule. So they will not attend on that flex day when we're cleaning, but they will be attending on the full 4-day schedule without flip-flopping into different cohorts.
Thank you. Brian, for all of our students, we know that there are some students where it is not safe for them to be at home. And so we know that we're building in space and opportunity within the structure of our school, that if they're supposed to be home on B day and it's not safe at home, there will be a safe place for them at the high school. That also extends to some students who might need extended learning or a different kind of learning or some kind of medical needs. So for the ALC, it would be the same premise, that we would want to see which students would need to be in school on that opposite day or longer. The challenge at our ALC, for example, if that class size is about half the size of a Hastings High School classroom, based on 50% occupancy, it might only be able to hold 8 students, where usually it holds 16. Where the high school classroom, I can have 18 in a classroom every other day or at 50% capacity. So we do think that we have some ways to meet our student needs. We might need to be a little bit creative with, as I said, transportation. But we're not going to turn a student away who's in need or needs of a place to be of safety. We'll solve it.
Thank you, Mike. That's helpful. Very much so. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Becky?
I have 2 questions. One about the lunches, if people are at home and distance learning. Are they going to be transported like we did at the this spring?
It'll be a little bit different. I'll let Jen or Brittany, they're both on, if one of them wants to speak to the specifics of that.
Sorry. Okay, so if students sign up for the Distance Learning Academy, we will have meals available for them. We're still working out the logistics of whether they would come in and pick it up or if we would deliver it on buses, but we for sure will have meals available.
Thank you. The second question I have about what Jesse said about the proper training for the safety of the staff and students. Who's doing that and how are they ensuring that this is being done?
So the safety of the training, that what we're trying to figure out is exactly what is the training that we're going to need to use. So at this point in time, maybe it's easier to answer it this way. What we're putting together are kind of a kit for every staff member, so not just teachers, but Cam Peterson has been working to find a cleaning agent that doesn't require, that's not abrasive enough that it requires gloves or goggles, but still allows us to disinfect, so that every staff member will have the ability to keep their spaces as clean as they feel they need to keep them, while they have, whether a couple, it's just them or it's a group of students that are coming in and out. And so the cleaning supplies that we have will dictate what training needs to take place with regard to that piece. The other side of the coin, which would be more of the training on how do we deal with certain situations, that's what Mary Ellen is working on this week. And we just are starting to get ramped up with our connections with Dakota County Health and MDH, because that's part of the group that we work with. And so they'll be providing us guidance with what we have to train and how we have to train different sets of staff, because the classroom teacher will be different than our center-based programs or staff that are in with students that might be in a different situation. I don't know, does that cover that, Dave Haveman, correctly?
Yes, we have some guidance that came out last week too from the Department of Health for PPE and safety equipment for working with special populations. And I circulated that last week and again today to administration, and we will be using that as part of our training as well. I mean, the fact of the matter is that some of the students that we serve, we can't socially distance from them. Like we have to serve their health needs or their behavioral needs, and we have reasons to have to be close to them to meet their educational needs. And so there are recommendations within that document that we'll be following as well. And so we are looking at that along with Mary Ellen and other documents to follow as things change.
Does that answer the question, Becky?
Yes.
Yeah, and it looked like Stephanie had a follow-up or another question.
Yeah, and just talking about PPE real quick. So the students, when we move to this hybrid model, when they're in the classroom, are we providing masks, or is that, what is the expectation there?
Yep. So we have enough masks. We got all of our masks now from FEMA, and we have other masks as well. Every student will be getting a mask, at least one. All of our staff will be getting masks. Students will be required to wear masks under the governor's executive order, as well as staff. And we already have that in place in the buildings and the staff that are in buildings now.
Along the lines, I'm sorry, Kelsey, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, on that question of masks, I have had a number of community members reach out to see if we would like donations of masks to be made if we're looking at, reusable masks and what that looks like. And so has there been any discussion about that?
A little bit. I'll let Jen Subert answer that, as she is our queen of mask procurement.
Okay.
I would say if anybody is interested, if they would reach out to me, if I can provide my email maybe, because I think there might become a point in time that we are looking for some, yes. We know that one mask per kid is not going to go very far. So definitely. So my email is jsubert, SEUBERT, at hastings.k12.mn.us.
All right. And then Brian, I think I cut you off there.
Oh, no worries. I'm wondering, in terms of training and prep and such, what is being done to make sure that the best we can, the students are being trained in the proper wearing of a mask and such? Because I can promise you, from what I've at least witnessed so far, they're not particularly good at it or adept at it.
I have a feeling that while we have not, that is one area that we have yet to have a very specific conversation about in our planning. So I appreciate the question. Although it's related to the fact that we know that during that first week, that connections week, there is a lot of stuff in this new phase of learning that we're going to have to just simply provide training around and redo everything from what you bring up in terms of masks. But if you can imagine, our buildings, the flow of the buildings is going to have to operate differently. How we work with the bathrooms, how we operate in the hallways, how we follow signage, what do we do when we come to the main office? This whole new normal has created a whole list of different logistical things that, to your point, Brian, we are simply going to have to start from scratch and create a list of here's how we do business. And it's going to be a little bit different at each level too, just because of the way it functions. But it will require training of students and families.
I might recommend, I saw the Department of Health had a couple of different posters that are available to be used for, reminders. Use them as signage to put up that could be pretty helpful, I would think.
Mm-hmm. And Jen Subert has been on the case for the last month, and we already have a ton of signage that is actually in the district office now, so that all of our buildings will have similar signage. So it won't matter if you go from one building to the next. The same sign means the same thing. So that'll be a good.
And all of that signage arrived today for the rest of the buildings. So we have it all. We just have to get it put up now.
Okay, great. So Becky had a question, and then we'll hop back to Dave, and then the question in the chat.
I just want to follow up with the masks. Certain kids or behaviors might not allow them to wear them all the time. Do we have a plan for discipline if they're wearing them or not wearing them, or if they're being disobedient? And is it the teacher's responsibility to make sure of this, or how does that look?
I think at this point, it's everyone's responsibility. First of all, what we've talked about is coming from the angle of making sure people understand how we're keeping us all safe by doing it. And it's coming from that angle. That's going to be a question across districts, not just Hastings, as we move forward, because it's going to be one we're going to need to figure out. One simple solution is to offer a face shield rather than a mask if we need to, because some of the things and reasons that students don't want to wear a mask might not even be a function of just not doing it, but might be a health reason. And so can we use face shields? And we do have the appropriate face shields that will be giving to staff, but that might be a solution. That's another thing we're going to have to work through once we actually hit the ground running, because it's going to happen. But fortunately, it won't just happen in our district, and so we will continue to utilize our resources, and whichever districts get hit with it first, we'll be using that information to make the best decisions we can.
All right, Dave, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I did. I'm thinking along the lines of the elementary kids, especially, when there's a need to remove the mask or take it off. And I'm thinking that I've seen and heard that a couple of different districts are going to lanyards so that as the student takes off the mask, it is secured and then they can put it right back on again. I don't know if you might want to look at that idea.
Lanyards are ordered.
Oh, you did get them already. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
I think what's good to point out, Dave, is that we've been in great shape having Carrie Gore and our kids over at Tilden. we've been able to have kids with masks on. And so some of these ideas and what works and doesn't work, she's been able to try out and see how it works. And the kids have really been doing a nice job over there. Of once we, again, back to the training thing, once we train them how to do it and get them into the habit, they seem to really do a nice job with it. So, yep, lanyards are ordered.
Okay. Any other questions? Right. I do have one more, just a discussion point as we talk about kind of people getting back in the buildings, teachers and students. I do think it's important to have the conversation about school board meetings going back in person, that if we are requesting that of our teachers, that I think that's a discussion we need to have as well for us. And so I'd like to kind of take this as some time to talk about that as a board and see when we would like to start going back to in-person meetings, and where. I think that's also an important question. Becky.
I think it's a great idea to show support to our teachers and staff members, that if we're having them go in, I think it's a great idea that we show unity and that we're get together in the schools, wear a mask, do our social distancing 6 feet apart. I'm open to talking about it and doing it as soon as possible.
Lisa?
Yeah, I'm comfortable going back, and I feel like, you know, MSBA has sent out some guidance about how to make that transition from a fully online meeting to one where we might be in person, and then we work to over time integrate the public to being in person, but find ways to engage them. I think that's a terrific idea, and it's probably time to start doing it. I'm not sure about the technical specifications, but I really felt like the lecture hall at the high school was a great setting.
Okay. Any other thoughts? No? Any concerns with us moving back to in-person meetings? How about that? Okay. Then we will start figuring out getting us back to in-person meetings and work on the logistics of that as well with HCTV and how we can kind of make this safe still. Scott?
Brian had a question.
I think Brian was up first.
Okay, sorry, Brian.
I'm just curious, what's happening with, I'm back on this again. What is happening with band and choir?
So we will have band and choir. We know that there's a different expectation for moving a little bit further apart, so we will utilize the larger spaces that we currently have. We're also looking at, for example, if a teacher needs a little different mask to be able to sing properly, that still have coverage. Those are some of the conversations we're having and looking at different ideas. But I don't know if we'll be able to have a concert the way that we had before. I'm hoping that can we have some smaller ensembles or be creative or do something different where students can still get the training and education and expertise for that area that they love and still be able to perform in some way. But I believe it'll look different until we're in person. We really won't be having a concert in the auditorium.
And I'm kind of curious, since I've got the floor right now, Mike and or Steve, do you have a concern with the way the schedules are set up in terms of, I mean, I don't know a ton about this, but it seems like depending on how the periods fall out, is there the potential for a teacher to have, say, a run of 4 consecutive classes without a break? I started thinking about the fact that they could go back to back to back to back, depending on how that order works out, and whether or not they'd have a break that they would need. And are they supposed to be trying to clean the room between hand? And if they have to go to the bathroom and clean the room and be ready for the next class, can all of that happen?
Steve has it figured out, yes.
Yeah, we have it figured out. So we, in our schedule, you know, we have the 6 periods, so where Mike has the 7, but the teacher will have 2 of the 3 periods, and then they'll have part of that third period will be a common prep with their like content colleagues. We also built it that way so that we have flexibility for coverage, because if we have a teacher go down, the substitute thing is a whole nother can of worms that we really haven't jumped into yet. If we do have that type of situation, we'll have people to cover each of the periods. So we kind of built it that way and to be flexible that way. But the common prep is a huge positive thing in terms of their planning across grade levels, across content areas. So they're not going to have boom, boom, boom right in a row, 100-minute periods where they don't get to breathe at all. So I think that's the beauty of the way that we built it, to have that flexibility for covering if we need it.
So Steve mentioned the open hours for coverage. We would have that as well. On a 7-period day, teachers teach 5 out of 7 if we were not in our blended schedule that we're looking at. So it already has been where teachers would start teaching at 7:50 in the morning, period 1, and they may teach until 11:25, 4 straight periods. So I think that's kind of the time frame that we're looking at, very similar. And also what we're trying to do is not have big gaps in time within a day. So if you're within a 4.5-week section, you're not teaching 4 classes, and then the other section you're teaching 1. We will try to balance that out to make sure that we have the coverage for staffing for what our sections are, but also we want to balance it out. As Steve said, many times we are going to be our own substitutes, and we have to be able to build in that flexibility within our schedules. So if someone is doing a study hall, or if they're doing a duty as part of their duty day, if we have to reassign that we're not losing significant coverage in other parts of the building.
And I do think this would be a good time to address the couple questions that went into the chat. And I know there was an answer put in the chat, but just for anyone watching, as far as looking at long-term substitutes, and are we looking at hiring more? What would the process be for subs?
Sure. We've talked about the potential of looking at hiring a couple permanent long-term subs to just be typically you'd call them a floater sub in the instance that we would need them. That probably makes a lot of sense moving forward to help out when we have the unknown happen in the classroom, right? Or allows us some flexibility in providing some relief. So yes, we've talked about that. We haven't landed on what a number would be. I think I mentioned this to the school board a couple meetings ago, that it's something we may want to look at as we get closer to a decision. So yes, that's the plan at this point.
Now, forever ago, Scott had a point or a question.
Yeah, it was actually covered. It was actually covered with the band, and
okay.
I was going to ask about band. Brian covered it with band and choir, so we're golden. The only other question I had was lockers. Will the students? I know lockers in the high school are kind of a not really used, but in the middle school, I see Steve shaking his head. No. So no lockers.
We've made that decision now. There's just no way to assign kids to lockers and have them spread out. So
right.
that'll be part of our communications to families,
right.
that just to let them know you're going to be when you're in school, you're a learning unit. Bring your stuff. You're going to bring your coat, put it on the back of your chair, because that's the chair you're going to be sitting in. And yep, we're not going to do that
and that makes sense, because that would be a lot of cleaning to be done. So yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Leave milk in there and it smells, so we don't want to.
Oh yes.
Lisa, you're unmuted. Do you have a question?
I do, but it might be a little bit early in the process. So I know today is a working meeting. This is a work session. We're not in a decision making. We're not going to adopt a base model today. But I think before we wrap up, it'd be good to lay out to the public watching, So we're meeting today. We have, when would the board likely take action on adopting a base learning program? If we could cover that schedule, that'd be cool.
Sure. And I think one thing that I guess the board needs to decide is whether the board wants to take action on creating a base model. That's not a requirement. It's definitely something some districts have done. It's not a district thing that all districts are doing. So that'll be the first decision is whether or not the board wants to have that. If that's the case, the first step is going to be we need to figure out when we are going to do a special board meeting, because our next scheduled board meeting isn't until the 26th, and that isn't going to work.
No, we do have a work session though on the 10th.
We do.
That we could.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't know. I've told Kelsey this too. I guess I'm not convinced that there needs to be an actual vote on what's our model going to be. And the reasoning behind that is our model is going to change. We could vote tonight on a hybrid split, and because that's what the official data would suggest, and in a week it's going to be something different. So I'm not sure that I would be leaning on the side that it makes sense to take a vote, but that's the board's prerogative if that's what you feel you need to do.
Becky?
Just a question on the A days and B days. How are we splitting that up? Just so the public kind of can they saw the calendar, can kind of have an awareness of my kids might go to Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday.
Yeah, and that type of question is really why, for me, and I would say for our team and for our families, I'm pushing to make a decision as far as whether vote or not vote as soon as possible for that exact reason. Right now, we are looking at initially dividing dividing kids up by alphabet. So just right down the middle by alphabet. Now, there are some caveats to that, because we have at the secondary level certain classes that obviously don't run multiple times during a day. And we have students that are from the same family and have different last names. So when you divide from the alphabet, that doesn't necessarily get it right. So we've already have Missy Williams working on a list so we know which kids are in which families are in that situation. And she's gonna be working with our secondary building principals to make sure that when we have kids that need to have this class, which is only running at this time on this day because it's a unique class, that it lines up, and maybe we have to switch all of that family onto a day that they wouldn't have been on, so that the first priority is to keep the family moving on the same day. Does that help?
When do you, yeah. But when do you think you would have that so we go back to the timeline that Lisa had brought up. So when would we look at a timeline to know which cohort we're thinking students would be in and families, so that they can start making those plans for the fall and figure out, with their employer or family or whatever that may be?
Right. I would think from a cohort standpoint, it would be I would say the 17th would be the earliest. And Jen Subert, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say that would be about the earliest we'd have a definite answer. And that's in line. The reason I say that is that's in line with what I'm seeing from other districts and their ability to say that. Now, I say that with the understanding that a lot of these other districts have decided to announce today and or yesterday or tomorrow with what model they're going with. And I'm using the term announce purposely, not deciding, but announcing as their base model. Because then that kicks everything into gear, right? So from a timeline, everything's a domino now moving forward. If we're in agreement, we're going to do a hybrid model and we know we got to divide these kids up, then we start that work tomorrow. The sooner we get that work done, the sooner we have then the answer to this question. The sooner we have that done, the sooner we can figure out transportation. The sooner the schedulers can make sure they've got kids divided up the way that they need them divided up. So everything moving forward is simply a domino effect. of what we can do. Now, that does not mean, so Lisa, back to your question. That doesn't mean that we still couldn't have some sort of an action where the board, would say, okay, here's what we're doing for the year, and it's inclusive of all of this. I'm not suggesting that at all, but we could announce that something like, we're doing the hybrid model, and we're going to start the process of whatever that looks like in detail over the next couple of weeks, more detail than what I provided tonight, because that's really what the teams are working on right now anyway. Yeah, and I mean, I certainly love the opportunity to vote on something that's going to make at least 30% of the people really, really mad. Because we don't get that opportunity very often. I think more what I'm leaning towards, or what my bias is not about us picking and then having to repick and re-vote every 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it is. But I would lean towards, as it stands right now, having a resolution and doing it even in a special meeting next week, that at the very least states the board's support of our incident command team, or whatever we want to call it. I think that's what the governor called it in the guidance, but saying that we support the recommendations of our team, and then in granting somebody, probably you, Bob, I'm looking at your picture, authority to make recommendations and modifications. Because I do want to take a stand with the administrative team as a board member in support and take that piece of responsibility. And I see Scott's got his hand up. Yep, Scott.
Yeah, that was just in support of you, Lisa. I absolutely agree. I think it's absolutely important for the school board to voice our opinions via our vote. I think that could be accomplished next week. I don't think we want to push that out to the 26th. I absolutely agree with Dr. McDowell that this is the best plan that we know of today. Tomorrow, that might change. And I was reading in one of the MSBA newsletters, they actually have a resolution template that would cover much of what happens after, okay, we choose a model, now what happens? Now, there's some type of change that is required in September or October or whatever, on a Thursday. It's like, well, no, that resolution then gives the authorization to the superintendent to move forward with haste to make those changes. So I would also recommend that we give that a look to see if we want to implement something like that. So that's what I had.
I guess, we all have to think about the process here and looking at the numbers from last week to what was just presented at the start of tonight's meeting, and looking at the school district, like everybody else in the state, is going to have to turn around and respond on a dime, and to put us in a position where we need to have a meeting to draw in all 7 of us and make a decision of direction is not going to be feasible. We're going to have to look at, like Scott mentioned, that resolution that MSBA's floating around, and delegate that responsibility, because we're not out of the woods by any means, and the numbers keep creeping up, and we as a district and board members will need to have a quick response to the situation as it develops. And seriously, that means turning on a dime.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott.
So then
Brian's got a question, statement.
Brian?
So I'm curious, on the split of alphas, unless there's something very different about Hastings, isn't there a huge preponderance of letters that are in one half of the alphabet? So if we split it right down the middle, how are we assured that we're going to have 50% and not like a 70-30 type of split? That's question one.
That's what we'll look at. That's our starting point. So, typically you're able to split somewhere in the LM range and you end up with about a 50-50 split. We may have to modify off of that one way or the other once we get through it. But the idea is to get it to the point where we can manage the transportation and we can manage the building capacity levels as well as our classrooms. So we will have to make some adjustments, I'm sure, once we do the initial split.
Fair enough. And my other, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steph.
Nope, go ahead, follow up.
So my follow-up to that is, if these kids are split out this way, whether they're distance or whatever they're doing, how do we know that we're going to be able to secure things like honors classes, AP classes? A lot of these kids are preparing for college, college entrance types of exams, things they're going to have to do, make sure their grades are synced up in order to be able to get those things done. I'm a little concerned that maybe I missed something. Mike, did you say that the kids on their off days are actually going to be quote unquote in the classroom anyway, listening in or something along those lines?
Right. So if you think of any of our classes, and one of the core values of responding to a service model in a pandemic, we've held that important to our school is to recognize who students are and who they're meant to be with ability levels, college and career choices. So all of our courses will continue to be offered. So that second to safety, that has been a real primary driver for us. So if the student is in cohort 1 and they're in class on Monday and Tuesday for A and A, then on Wednesday, they'll have some work for all of their classes, and all of our students will not be in session on Wednesday. So that's more asynchronous, which is with not as much direct communication or guidance from the teacher in terms of a traditional lesson. But then on Thursday and Friday, when they are at home, then there will be lessons guided through Schoology, which we know will be used by all of our teachers in a very consistent way, that they will continue their learning. And so as a teacher, teacher's going to have to plan for, I have my in-person students, but now I have my students who are at home, and I'm responsible for both of them. And it very well may be that I'm teaching the same lessons, and whether you're at home or whether you're with me in class, they're going to be very, very similar. But also there might be a lot of the work where I'm going to be talking about it, and we're going to be going through peer editing, for example, of an essay in class. And when you're at home on your distance learning day, that's when you're doing the research, that's when you're doing your rewrites, and that's when you're working more independently. So you will be, if you're in my AP physics class, you will be in class the entire week, that entire 4.5 weeks. It's going to be a little bit different when you're in person. I think what our teachers have said and what we've encouraged people to think of is, think of yourself as a digital educator, and that if we can try and use our learning management system and Schoology in a way that it's much more interactive, whether you're in school or not, that's going to be best for everyone, including you as a teacher, to try and plan that out.
Okay, so so even the online academy would have college in the schools, AP, there'd be equivalency there as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. That's why we're going with Edgenuity, because Edgenuity allows us to have a comprehensive high school and middle school curriculum. It also includes online elective courses, and it also includes the AP package as well. So it really is giving us the flexibility to make sure we can meet the needs of the most kids.
The other piece I wanted to mention, when they have that 100-minute prep, there is the part of that that's a prep, and part of that also from the language from the state is that they are supposed to have office hours to be able to work with the students that are not there. So when people probably say, well, they have 2 classes and then they have a 100-minute prep. They have a common prep, which is a certain amount of time, and then the other amount of time is provided for office hours to be able to connect with those kids that aren't there. So there is that built into our schedule too. So just something to keep in mind.
Okay. So Stephanie, did you have a question?
I did, and it's more of a clarifying question that I think maybe either Steve or Mike can answer. So talking about high school and middle school with the breakout of the different periods, the students are they going to be with the same students each period, or is it their health bubble will be that 50% that are there Monday and Tuesday, Thursday and Friday? Can you clarify that?
Sure. I think Steve and I will have different answers based on our ability. So by talking about trying to honor students with the ability levels and the courses that are very, very important to them, the students will be with different students each class period. So what's been important to us has been, rather than a student going through 7 periods in their day, how can we offer the comprehensive high school experience in the way that we can mitigate risk the best that we possibly can. So we've looked at different models from 1 period a day, not from 7, where we feel like we're at right now offers both, where we can mitigate risk. But we're also doing things as we're setting up an advisory, and the advisory, rather than a random group of students being put together in a non-COVID event, would be the best way to do that. That is going to be by your 5th hour class. So students will be with their 5th hour teacher. They will be with their 5th hour teacher during lunch, and then with their 5th hour teacher for advisory. So the number of times that we're passing between classes will be reduced. Also, our motto for passing time, it's going to be very short. And 2 things: keep to the right and keep moving. So we will have different ways you'll be going on different sides of the locker base. And really, we're looking for students to use the restroom during the class period to reduce the number of students that are in the restroom at any given time. That's a little bit different thought on it, but again, it comes from this: we want students to have the ability to be and use the restroom, but we're not saying passing time is hanging out in the hallway or the long goodbye hug or any. I mean, it's really purposeful. Let's get from point A to point B. We probably will have, for example, juniors and seniors. They'll pass first, and then after a minute, we'll have freshmen and sophomores pass. Just again to try and mitigate that risk that's in the hallway. At the same time, we want to share the message of why this is important. We want to have some fun with it. We're not just saying do it because we say so. But if we talk about our staff and we talk about the students who are at risk for our health, of course, we want to do anything we can for anyone. So that's the approach that we'll take.
Stephanie, I missed the first part of your question because my internet froze. And I can't answer based on Mike's response. Sorry.
Right. No, so the question was that, for middle school and high school, they're going to be breaking out into, three classes a day when they're actually in session at the schools. So the question was, will they be with different students every period? Like they're not one class will follow into the next one and into the next one. It's going to be mixed. So then their health bubble, if you want to call it that, would be that 50% whoever's there Monday and Tuesday, and then Thursday and Friday. Is that how I'm reading it?
Yes, and we kind of built. That's the beauty of our. I shouldn't say cohorts because we're calling A and B cohorts. So we're calling them learning groups. So our learning groups are built so that they are with those kids. If something happens that maybe a certain part of the building shuts down, maybe a class goes down because somebody was positive, we have that flexibility then to have actually the teachers move, because we have a certain amount of teachers that are working with a certain amount of kids. So we've done that extra step of mitigation where if all of a sudden, we're not going to do passing times, we're going to have the teachers rotate. We can progress to that if we want, if we need to. So there, the only other piece that we're going to really have to do a lot of thinking on is when they go to like music, because that would be the only time, music or FIAD, when they would leave that area where they have their classes. And we'll talk a lot more about that, about the movement of kids then. So. And similar to what Mike said, not hanging out at lockers because there was no lockers. They don't have lockers. So.
Thank you, Mike and Steve.
Scott?
You mentioned Edgenuity. Will that be used at the middle school and high school level?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So after this meeting tonight, can you talk about what happens tonight, tomorrow, leading up to the next school board meeting?
Yep. So I think, the thing we'll have to decide is one, whether we want to call the next meeting a special meeting or an emergency meeting. That'd be the first thing. Based on that, that would dictate, I suppose, when the earliest would be we could do one of those meetings, because as we're all aware, emergency meeting doesn't have the same posting requirements as a special meeting. Special meeting, we need to post 3 days. We need to decide whether we want to do the meeting in the evening like this on Monday, or if we'd want to do a morning meeting on Monday. I know some boards have done that for purposes of like this. In terms of what happens next with us, in my mind, my plan was to put out a written form of kind of here's what we think our plan is to our families, probably tomorrow morning, that explains kind of in writing general terms, here's what we're looking at doing, and the board is expected then to take action on this plan on Monday. I'm not hearing any, at this point anyway, I'm not hearing any dissent in terms of the model of the hybrid as a model moving forward. So I would be having the team continue because this is truly a team effort. The team is amazing. The amount of work that has been pounded out in the last couple of weeks is seriously out of control. The level of detail, and we have not gone easy on people. We have been pushing and pushing and pushing. So I would continue to have everybody working what they're working on, assuming that we're going to go with the hybrid model as an official action on Monday, unless I hear otherwise. Originally we were planning on doing, a little bit long when we didn't know the information we had before. We were looking at the opportunity to take tons and tons of feedback on different options. And I think in the pie in the sky view, we were thinking we're gonna get to this point and it's legitimately going to be an option of, do we want to go in person? Do we want to go hybrid? Do we want to go that? That has all changed. As you can tell, because of just the data. And so I don't see a whole lot of opportunity for us to do more than getting feedback on changing the specifics of details, like we talked about tonight, the nuances that will happen and people's level of comfort. For example, one thing that's come up as, can we look at maybe having the middle school and the high school change their start times? Okay, well, that's a possibility, because now that we're going to a two-tiered system and secondary would be on its own, that might make sense to do. Those are the type of things I think would be nuanced changes moving forward. But I think, again, the best laid plans of trying to have all of this secondary feedback would not be serving people really well, because we don't have as many options as we had before, and we're really into the detail phase. And we'd be focusing with our staff now, our teachers, and like we're doing now, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? What's your capacity to pull this off? So we've pressed forward doing what we're doing, assuming that while it's not an official announcement, we're going to plan on this model being what the board takes up on Monday.
Scott?
Yeah, I agree. I think, just to echo Dr. McDowell, I think that's the way that we need to go. I have, and I'm sure other board members have as well, received feedback from the community, various viewpoints on this. What should we be communicating as a good way for them to share that feedback with as a board? We need to be careful with communications, because it can quickly turn into what could be construed as a serial meeting. So sending it to all the board members is fine, but then all of us responding to it in a serial fashion is not fine. Mm-hmm. So the topic was brought up of, hey, we should have a community listening session, open it up to everyone, not just a small group of parents, et cetera. So I know that others have received that information as well. How as a board, how as a district do we want to receive this feedback from the community? Obviously, I'm sure every board member is open to receiving phone calls, emails, that's not a problem. But how do we then disseminate that information into the district in a thoughtful way? And in a consistent, how do we give feedback to the community in a consistent way?
Sure. Well, from our perspective, we can open up some communication opportunities for people to provide feedback on what they heard tonight. That's what we've done in the past. So that's easy enough. I mean, we can, we wouldn't necessarily have to have a survey of sorts, but we could send out like we've done in the past, a survey looking thing, either through Google Forms or through our survey that really asks for that feedback on what people, and we could ask it in a couple very, like we've done before, we can ask some questions like, what did you really agree with? What do you have a question about? What are you struggling with? So that it kind of pre-categorizes for us on how to pay attention to some stuff, but really then open it up to people to provide that feedback to us. We did that as we went through the first set before we got to focus groups, and that seemed to work really well. We got a lot of feedback from people there. It's what got us to the point that we've gotten to now, is really looking at and listening to that feedback. So we, by all means, could probably send that out tomorrow, not only to families, but put it on our website. We've created a new web page on our website that is just for this work. And so maybe we put it right there with our links. And if we still have quite a few people on here, maybe that's what we do, and people know that they need at a minimum to go to our website, and for everybody that we have access to, we can send it out.
Yeah, I think having a push and pull model where we are pushing the information out to the families via the normal school connects, maybe not with a phone call, but with an email. And then also the pull method of, okay, let's put it on the website and let people let people go there as well to give that information. With the amount of conversations that I've had via phone, via email, in the grocery store, on the sidewalk, et cetera, it's obvious that people have a lot of questions. They have a lot of concerns. I think we've covered a ton of ground tonight, and I think we've answered a lot of questions for the community. Undoubtedly, there are going to be things, circumstances that we haven't thought of, or that, haven't come up in this conversation tonight that we'll want to have covered. And I want the community to be heard, with, again, with what Lisa said, where we need to recognize that not everybody is going to be happy with this direction.
Why don't we do that tomorrow then? We'll get a quick survey type thing put together. That'll be more of a general question. We can send it out to everybody. It'll be from terms of a survey, an unlocked link, meaning that people can share it. So people that are listening tonight, the way it'll be set up, you just have to share the link or tell somebody where to go. And so even if they're not a family in our system, but are in the community, all they got to do is click on the link and they could provide their input as well.
Right. And for the community that is listening, if you go to the ISD 200 webpage and you go to the school board page, all the school board members are listed there with our emails, with our phone numbers. So please feel free, reach out. I think I speak for everyone when I say we welcome conversations. So please.
All right. We'll get that set up tomorrow.
Thank you. I think Brian has his hand up.
Yeah, he does.
All right, Brian.
Thanks, Scott. Bob, I think also something that might be helpful to folks listening is helping develop just a little bit of better understanding about the state guidelines versus a mandate versus the minimum that's required by the state those types of things. You know, we talked a lot about the guidelines and how it works, but I think it'd be helpful for people to understand, well, is it a guideline or is it a mandate? Are we determining something based on what we want to do, or is the state telling us certain things we have to do? I think it would be helpful if you could just lay that out just briefly in terms of here's how it works and this is why this is this, because the state says these things and we're dovetailing off of that, or the state said do whatever you want and we're doing, you know, you get my point. I want people to understand the difference between a guideline and a mandate, and is there a base thing that we have to do versus things we can do, and so on and so forth. We're a little bit stuck in Dakota County, I'll be honest about that, because we're as far southeast as you can get. I wish we were in Goodhue right now, but we're not. So if you could just maybe articulate just a little bit on that.
Do you want me to do that now, or are you talking, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. I just didn't want to go into detail, and you were thinking you wanted me to put that into the thing tomorrow. And so the way that this works, and that's a great point, between guidelines and mandates. And so for starters, if people have questions, if you go to the Minnesota Department of Education website, you go to the Minnesota Department of Health website, you will find links right on their website related to COVID, and you will be able to find both documents. One is the guidance for schools, and one is the Department of Health's guiding documents for schools. So the easiest place to start is probably with the mandates. So what is mandated right now is coming from the Department of Health and the CDC. And it really has to do with how, no different than anything else that we're experiencing. Everything is based upon this high risk situation and how to mitigate it, right? So when we have in-person learning, that means that there are no mandates put on us in terms of social distancing, in terms of anything else that we do, except for when it comes to food, because the food is still being guided by restaurant guidance. So we could be in person right now, not have any 6-foot restrictions. We don't have any 50% capacity restrictions, but when it came to the lunchroom, we would have 50% occupancy and 6 foot. That would be driven by health mandate for that. Once we move into hybrid model, the mandate is you have to follow the 6 foot and 50% occupancy guidelines that are there. I shouldn't use guidelines. It's a mandate. You have to follow those rules. So everything you do has to be inside of the 50% and 6. Distance obviously doesn't impact because you're distance full time. So that's the first layer inside of that. Now, from a guideline standpoint, what the Department of Education and the governor have said is, we're going to calculate our guideline based on county by county information. And we are going to calculate over a 14-day period of time what number of cases that county has per 10,000. And based on that number, we are going to give guidance, which will be the minimum that you have to do. So that's where the page comes in that talks about, see if I can get it pulled up here again. Sorry, this is taking a second. My computer is not cooperating. There we go. This page right here. So these are recommendations or guidelines minimum. So right now, we are in this 10 to 19 number officially from the last data. That means that from a guideline standpoint, we should start making decisions with elementary kids being in person, so no restrictions. and secondary students being in hybrid. Where it changes from guideline to requirement is, right now, if we were in school today, we could not put our secondary students in a in-person model unless we got approval with the health department. So we can go more restrictive, but we cannot go less restrictive until the numbers would dictate in our county that we would be in a 0 to 9 over a 14-day period of time for all kids to be in person. So it becomes a guideline until you want to start going less restrictive. And then it becomes no, you can't do that unless you get special permission. You can always go more restrictive. So that's where this becomes a guidance. And so that's where I think many people that are listening tonight, if they look around, you're going to see, again, many of our surrounding districts are in the same spot we're in, where we are, particularly those that are in Dakota County. Right now, if you looked at today, we'd be at 21 if the decision was being made today. So we'd already be in hybrid learning for all students, meaning we couldn't even have in-person for elementary if we wanted to, if that were the case today, without special permission. And that's going to be the hard part as we move through this. So I guess to answer your question, most of the health related things are mandates. Most of the educational things have to live inside of that mandate, but are a recommendation to start with, because the governor and the Department of Education have said, we know that every community and school district is different. And we know that a community that has lots of buildings but has few kids, they could have all their kids in buildings because they have lots of space, but they may not have the staff to do it. Whereas you could have another district that has lots and lots of staff and low class sizes, but they don't have the building space to spread out. Does that answer the question or help with that, Brian?
I think it does, Bob, because what I don't want to have happen is I don't want people to get the impression that we're doing whatever, that you're recommending whatever you want to recommend. I want the understanding to be the Minnesota Department of Health is saying, no, you can't do X because of Y. And I think that's important for people to understand, that it's not, just something that you're throwing out there. It's predicated on something Minnesota Department of Health is going to allow or not allow.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay, Scott?
To that end, as we are monitoring those numbers, is that something that we can put a link to the Dakota County numbers on our website so that it's just super easy for people to find and there's no confusion over what numbers are being used?
Yes, there is. Our plan is to have the way that the page is being set up is we will have a parent resource section, and then we will have a related links section on there right when you go to it. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible.
Perfect.
So that's the timeline on that. Is we're really ramping that up today and tomorrow and Friday to get that going.
Yeah, I just want the community and staff and the board to everybody use the same set of numbers so that, we have that baseline agreement.
Yep. And you won't, and that's a good clarification. The numbers that are generated on a daily basis are really coming out of the county. So if people were to go to the county website, they can 2 clicks into the county website and you can scroll across their graphs and it'll tell you the daily count.
Yeah, I think you need to hover over the bar on the graph and it will pop up it'll pop up the day and the count for that value on the graph, because the bars you can't really tell. I mean,
but there isn't a place. I know there's a couple people that are putting out private websites where they're trying to calculate, what is it that the state's doing, and we've done that internally so we can moderate it. And like I said, Jen Subert has some magical formula behind on an Excel sheet that's allowing us to take numbers and crunch them just like the state is right now for that. But there isn't The state is going to, the Department of Education, Department of Health is going to put out their 14-day numbers on their schedule. I think Brian and Scott, that's an important thing for people to understand is the last set of numbers that they gave us were historical numbers, right? So the minute they came out, they were already a week late. They had nothing to do with today, which is why they're transitioning to the county and why school districts and superintendents have been told this is a starting spot. Connect with your county. So like this morning, I was on the phone with the Dakota County nurse that we were assigned to and confirming that what we're seeing is exactly what they're seeing. And we will have those conversations locally because what's happening in Hastings might be totally different than what's happening in one of the other cities. So even at that level, we could get to a spot where we say, it makes more sense for us to do this right now. So to both of your questions, we have flexibility in making decisions based on data, but they don't want us doing it in isolation. They want us working directly with the county. And so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I guess my underlying point on that is we just need to be very transparent with that so that everybody is super clear that this is our one source of truth. Here's the number we're using. And so we're all working off of that same number so that we're not, looking to different sources for different numbers and then having that confusion.
Yep. And the number, to that point, the number changes every day at 4:30 at this point. So that's as early as we get it. So everything is grounded in that Dakota County case count that gets published at 4:30 every day. And then that's what the figures are based off of.
Okay, so I do have a couple more questions that have come up. One, is there going to be a cap on childcare, or how is that going to work? So especially for those Pinecrest families who are used to kind of being on a same schedule, if they have a younger kiddo in elementary who is now starting later than the older students, as far as trying to get that kiddo to school, and not wanting to leave them alone at home while the parents go to work. I mean, what is that looking like? How does childcare work for that?
Sure. And Carrie Gore is on here, and I know that the level of detail I have on that is that right now it'll be based on space. So we'll take as many kids as we can based on the space that we have to staff. I'm seeing Carrie, but she's not. Oh, here she comes.
Yep, and I would agree with what Bob just said there. So we do have to place tier 1 essential workers into the midday option first, and then based on space, we'll go from there. And again, our goal is to take as many families as possible.
Okay. And then another question, just to clarify for people who are wondering why we're not taking a vote on this tonight or a resolution on this tonight. It is because this meeting was not set up as posted to the public, that this would be a special meeting to be making a decision. And so that will get set up now to make an official resolution statement. But Dave?
I think that it's important. I would suggest that we have a emergency meeting on Monday, and that way we kind of spread the issues as far as notifications a little bit, using that versus the special meeting notifications, and the topic be strictly building towards a resolution to give our team the ability to turn on a dime as the numbers would change one direction or the other as the topic for that emergency meeting.
Now, would board members be able to meet in the morning on Monday just to make it official and kind of move things? Okay, I see Stephanie shaking her head no.
If it's really early in the morning, I can.
What is really early in the morning?
Before 6 a.m.?
Well, yeah, no.
That's good for me. I'm available.
No, I'm out.
No, I'd say I need to try to be to work no later than 9, 10 o'clock. So if we were to meet at like 8, I could make that happen, or even as late as 8:30, but nothing past that.
Or maybe a lunchtime meeting. No, lunchtime meeting doesn't work. Because
That'd be fine, Scott, as long as you bring a sandwich for me.
Absolutely, come on over.
Can we do it
All right,
8:30?
so could 8 or 8:30?
8 a.m. works for me on Monday the 10th. I'm booked with meetings from 8:30, and then later in the morning I free up, and then lunchtime I free up.
Okay, so would 8 a.m. work, Dave? You mentioned 8:30. Would 8 work? You're
on mute,
muted.
Dave.
Still muted. There you go.
I can manage 8 a.m.
Becky?
I'm going to run and check my schedule. I don't have my calendar in front of me. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Stephanie?
She had
Yes.
said 8 works.
She had said 8
Yeah.
works. Lisa said 8 works. Brian?
I'm checking right now.
Okay. And 8 works on my end.
I mean, it should be relatively fast. The question is, Kelsey, do you have enough information from MSBA that we'd have a resolution at hand?
Yep, we're good.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm good for Monday.
You're good for Monday?
Yeah,
8 a.m.?
Work, yep.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I could do it.
Great. $8 a.m. Monday works great then. All right, is there anything else we need to cover or discuss tonight? Any questions? Do we feel ready for Monday?
Where will it be?
Okay. Yeah, do we want to, maybe that's our last Zoom meeting?
Yeah, for it to work for me, just logistically, I would need it to be a remote meeting. I guess I had that in my head. I apologize. I didn't even consider that it would not be a remote meeting.
And myself also, it would need to be a remote meeting.
Okay. All right, then we will have Monday's meeting be remote, and then we will start figuring out the in-person meeting logistics from there. Great.
Can do.
All right, well, yeah, and thank you to our whole team for pulling this together. I know there has been so many moving pieces with all of this and so many different things to take into account. And I really appreciate all the work you've put into it.
Yeah, thank you. This is truly a Hastings plan. This is not a one-person plan. This is not just my plan. This is the group. Everybody has and it's not just administrators. This is teachers and staff, and everybody is pouring into their part of this to make it what it is. So it's taking a village, that's for sure.
Yeah. But thank you for all of your hard work.
Okay,
all right.
We'll get set for Monday. Thank you for your attention tonight and questions and all that. Appreciate it. Team, thanks for being on the call. And we'll see all of you bright and early tomorrow morning.
Everybody go be awesome and be well.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, folks.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
Bye.
Good night.